This episode of the Creep Street Podcast is brought to you by Martini Coffee Roasters. You know, people always look at me weird when I say I start off every morning with a big old martini. But then I set them straight, and I tell them I'm talking about Martini Coffee Roasters coffee. A delicious coffee made by the Martini family. They roast their coffee using a traditional method of sight and sound to roast those little babies to perfection. And they also sell green coffee beans for those home roasters out there. And right now, fans of the Creep Street Podcast can get 20% off their entire order by using the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Once again, for 20% off your order, use the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Martini Coffee Roasters, the perfect coffee to keep you creeps caffeinated.
You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Citizens of the Milky Way, this is Maureen Bogey.
And this is Dylan Hackworth.
And you are listening to the Creep Street Podcast.
Oh, yeah, baby, yeah.
That's right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for a spooky, scary episode.
Oh, yes. This one's going to put chills down your spine.
Put a little hair on your chest.
That's right.
That's right. To support the podcast, please like, rate, subscribe, leave a review, tell a friend, anything like that really helps us out. We so appreciate it. You can also follow us on Instagram at Creep Street Podcast, Twitter at Creep Street Pod. We're on Facebook, and on our Facebook, we have a subgroup called Citizens of the Milky Way. We highly recommend you check that out. And if one episode a week is not enough for you, and it's not.
Quit kidding yourself, pal. Quit kidding yourself.
You can head on over to patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast for some great bonus content. We have some short stories on there. We have full bonus episodes. We have spoiler casts of different TV shows and movies. We have lots of different types of content up on the Patreon. So feel free to check that out at patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast.
Whew.
Last week, we hit you with a cult. We hit you with the Source family.
Oh, yes.
And we got a lot of great responses from that. Thank you so much to everyone for listening to that episode. But today we wanted to go back to our bread and butter.
Oh, yes.
What really we vibe with here at Creep Street Podcast. And we wanted to go back to a classic haunting story.
Oh, yes.
Dylan, please, will you tell the folks what we are talking about today?
Ghouls and gals, today the subject of our episode is the haunting of the Ancient Ram Inn. Okay, now let me just bend you over and spank you with my sources real quick.
Okay, come on.
First was an article called The Ancient Ram Inn, A Visit to England's Most Haunted House by Darman Richter at xutopia.com. And another article called Terrifying Hauntings at the Ancient Ram Inn by Brent Swanser at Mysterious Universe. And, of course, Season 2, Episode 8 of Ghost Adventure.
Ooh, that's right. Very interesting. Well, Dylan, thank you so much for putting together this fantastic episode, and we can't wait to just dive right in.
Well, I'm excited to do this one, because this is in the same vein as, like, Waverly Hills.
Right.
It is a place visited by many a paranormal show, many ghost hunter shows, both American, European, all over. They've all visited the Ancient Ram Inn. The Ancient Ram Inn is said to be one of the most dangerously haunted places in all of England, if not the world. So like many of the locations we've covered on this show, this terrifying place is tucked away in one of the most beautiful areas you could think of.
Oh, yes.
The Ancient Ram Inn is located in the southwest of England in Gloucestershire County, in the tiny town of Wootton-under-Edge. This is smack dab in the middle of what is known as the Cotswold region. It's a place of immense beauty, and though I have no idea, I can imagine that it's probably not cheap to live there. It's very quiet. It looks like something out of a Hallmark movie.
Oh, very nice.
Gorgeous area. Well, you'd drive down one of the roads through these sleepy hills, and most likely there'd be a bit of fog in the air as well. But it wouldn't be hard to know once you've found the Ancient Ram Inn, because while there's modern roads and electric lines everywhere that course through the area, the inn stands out like something out of time. On the side facing the road, there are no doors, only ancient crooked windows. And on the outside of the structure, you will see signs boasting of its paranormal notoriety. In fact, this place, this area, has been inhabited since at least the Bronze Age. Everything from carvings and ancient tools and standing stones have been discovered dating back to that time. The inn itself, buckle up for this, was built all the way back in the year 1145.
Damn.
So quite literally, it's over 900 years old.
Yeah.
It's going on it's going on 1,000 fucking years old.
Damn.
But the history of just the location can go back to 3000 BC. It's believed that the site on which the inn stands was once a location of pagan sacrifices.
Oh, no.
The last owner, who we will dive into later, even claimed that there was a wooden post at the residence that dates back 7,000 years.
Oh.
And that it was the site of many human sacrifices, though this has not been confirmed. But now, during the reign of King John in the 13th century, much of the town of Wootton was destroyed. Long story short, King John's reign was one of constant turbulence, and he was a very unpopular king, apparently. At the time, Wootton was a Saxon village. Die-hard supporters of King John burned nearly the entire village to the ground as backlash to the preparations that were being made for the Magna Carta. Most people probably, learn about the Magna Carta like around high school, at least here. As with many of these stories, for the sake of the episode, I'm obviously condensing a ton of very cool history just into a paragraph or two, but know that this is a very fascinating time in history. Well, nearly every building in the area had been burned to the ground, but the building that would later go on to be the ancient Ram Inn was the only one left standing.
Oh, very interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
It was then made a place for housing craftsmen and both enslaved and non-enslaved workers alike who had been put to work erecting the Church of St. Mary right there in the town center. Now, there's also several creeks and streams that run through the area, and remember what we know about water and the supernatural.
That's right, huge conduit.
Well, many of these streams that were on the lands that the inn sits on had to be redirected for the construction of the church. Some think that maybe that is where this all began. There was already these pagan sacrifices, but when they started messing with the landscape, maybe that is what kicked the hornet's nest, as they say.
Okay.
Many believe that this is where the site's dark history begins. For a millennium, these lands were home to countless pagan societies. Those who believe say that this disturbance opened a sort of portal for dark entities to make their way through. And also, it should be noted that both the inn and the church were built upon what are known as ley lines. Yes, ley lines are a fascinating topic. The fascinating topic of the unexplained that we will save for another episode because they're an episode all their own. But it's a theory that throughout human history, certain structures and famous landmarks have been built intentionally on these lines, which are believed to emanate an energy of some kind.
Right. It is said that maybe Hellfire Farm was built on or near some ley lines as well.
Very true, very true. It's said that a straight line can be drawn from many of these locations. These locations are all around the world, of course, but another one there in the UK would be Stonehenge.
Oh.
And apparently, if you take a map and draw a straight line from Stonehenge to the church, it runs right across the ancient Ram Inn. Well, today the inn is the oldest standing building in Wootton-under-Edge. It is also apparently the site of the oldest window in England.
Oh, okay, pop off.
And apparently the oldest board game in England as well. Apparently a game called Nine Men's Murrays was carved into a stone inglenook there in 1540.
Damn, it sounds like a blast.
In fact, it was during the 1500s that one of our most famous stories concerning the inn took place. The main character in this tale concerns a woman who was said to be a witch. Maybe she was, maybe she wasn't, but I will tell that tale very shortly.
Oh, okay, leaving us in suspense. I like it.
Throughout history, this building was used as different things. It obviously, even back in the 15th, 16th century, it operated as an inn sometimes it wasn't an inn. But jumping forward to modern day, up into 1930, the place was once again adapted into an inn when it was bought by a Maurice de Bath, And since his ownership, the place has changed hands several times. As you can imagine, when something is as old as the ancient ram, time is not kind. The place has been crumbling into disrepair for some time, but by now it had come to be known as a very haunted place. And then by 1965, the place had become apparently infested with what are called death watch beetles.
Oh, what the fuck?
And the place was literally falling apart. The local council had marked the place to be demolished in order to make room for expanding the road that went by it. But that's when the last and most famous owner of the place stepped in at the last moment.
Okay, here we go.
This man was John Humphreys. Humphreys was a former train engineer who bought the building from the Whitbread Brewing Company for a surprisingly low sum of only 2,600 pounds.
Oh, wow.
You'd think something that, I mean, I get that it's decrepit, but like,
still,
it's
like old.
Yeah, you'd think that
So you think that would count for something?
Jesus, yeah. Immediately after buying the place, Humphreys moved in with his wife and 3 daughters. The problem was the place was still a total disaster. It was falling apart and apparently didn't even have running water. From what I can understand, one of my main sources was written in 2015. It said that even then it still didn't have running water in 2015. God. Apparently, from the day the family moved in, they were plagued by supernatural activity.
Oh, fuck.
This combined with the dilapidated state of the place and a lot of tension was put on the family. And after a time, Humphrey's wife would leave him and he would nearly lose all his money. And for a time, he was even estranged from his daughters.
And that's something that we hear coming up again and again and again with these paranormal cases, especially with haunted house cases where it's like it really can tear the family apart.
Right. A member of the family almost becomes obsessed with the place.
Right. And like can't see why other people don't want to stay there or can't handle it.
Right. Think of Amityville, Hellfire Farm was the same thing.
Right.
Like one member of the family becomes almost obsessed. It reminds me of like The Shining, even though that's fiction. It's like one character becomes so obsessed with the place.
Right.
That it becomes a part of their identity. Yeah, it's very strange phenomenon. Nevertheless, John refused to move out of the inn. But as the stories of the inn's supernatural hauntings became more famous, the site became a location of several paranormal shows and features. So in that respect, money did start to come in. John lived there all alone until the day he died, and he claimed to have supernatural experiences on a daily basis, some of which were quite violent and terrifying. So, this is where we begin the haunting portion of the show.
Oh gosh. Okay, here we go. Buckle up.
Now, what's great, like I said, is one of my sources was written by an investigator who stayed in the place and got a room-by-room tour by John himself. So let's get one thing clear up top. John was a very eccentric guy.
Yes.
The moment he steps on screen in that episode of Ghost Adventures,
you know it.
You can see it.
I mean, it's a forward brush moment of the hair.
Oh yeah, it's wild.
It's going all the way back and it's going all the way forward with this forward brush.
Oh yeah.
Unlike anything I've ever seen, really. And can we judge someone based on just their hairstyle? Of course not.
Of course not.
But I think it's something worth noting that this hairstyle was bold and it was serious.
Yes. He was apparently a bit of a hoarder as well and had many strange trinkets and decorations around the place. So the first room where we're going to start is what is called the men's kitchen.
Oh, the men's kitchen. Okay. This one's for the boys.
I guess so. The room is decorated with red velvet seats by a fireplace, and all around are various just knickknacks that John has used to decorate with. There's no like theme. It's just things from all different eras everywhere. But as you look closer, amongst the mundane decor, such as ceramic cats and willow pattern vases, you can see other more spooky items. A Ouija board stands propped up against the stone wall, as well as just random recreations of human skulls scattered about the place.
Oh, God.
Not to mention a variety of taxidermied animals all over. It's clear that John had some sort of fascination with the occult. Apparently in this room, an innocent woman was murdered by highwaymen, and the soul still haunts that room. It's also in this room that guests will report hearing the sound of a baby crying when there's clearly no baby around. Electronics will often malfunction in this room without explanation, and camera batteries that were fully charged one moment will seem to mysteriously be dead and drained of all power the next. In fact, in 2003, the inn was visited by what is called the Ghost Club. I guess it's a paranormal investigative group that was formed all the way back in 1862.
Oh my God.
So they got some legs, as you can see.
Yeah.
They discovered a heightened electromagnetic frequency flowing throughout the place, as well as photographed many strange orbs that seemed to follow John around. But that was nothing compared to what was discovered in 1997, when a group of paranormal investigators from the town of Swindon paid a visit to the ancient Ram Inn.
Welcome. Okay, here we go.
They were particularly interested in the building's cellar. That was said that there was perhaps maybe a cellar under the floor that had been sealed off under the concrete in this room, the men's kitchen. So they were given permission to tear up, select parts of the concrete floor, but instead of a cellar, they found something much more terrifying. What they found was a grave of a woman and a child, along with some broken iron shards. The pieces were later analyzed by the Bristol Museum, who concluded that the findings seemed to imply a ritual human sacrifice.
What the fuck?
And that it was probably an iron dagger that was used, explaining those iron shards. What's strangest of all, though, is that the very night the investigators left the ancient Ram Inn after they discovered that grave, they were involved in a car accident. Now, I have no idea how serious this accident was. If anyone was injured, I have no idea. My source just said they were involved in an accident on the way home.
Interesting. Well, so that could be just a coincidence, but
timing is quite strange.
Yes.
Well, when John found out there had been an actual grave under the floor of this room, he actually wasn't surprised. He claimed that on the very first night, when the family moved in, after buying the house, he had kind of set up a temporary bedroom in there while they were moving in and getting things organized. And what he didn't know at that time was that on that night, he placed his bed directly over where this grave was.
Oh no.
He says during the night, some unseen force grabbed him by the ankle and yanked him out of the bed like he was no more than a teddy bear. Since then, he was certain there was something down under that room, but he had no idea what until now. Today, though, even some spiritualists and diviners believe that there's still more underneath that floor besides that grave. Some think that there might actually be an underground tunnel that leads directly to the church's crypt there in town.
Wow, could you imagine if that was real?
How wild would that be?
They gotta figure that out, because that would be wild.
That would be insane. And John himself said, hey, that may or may not be true, but he had no intention of investigating further in case he were to disturb any more spirits than there already were. Well, next we move on to what is called the Mayflower Barn. Now, this barn sits alongside the road, and it's attached to the inn. It's a rather large attachment that I guess used to be in the early days used as a stable where people would put their horses if they were staying at the inn. Apparently at some point it was even used as a living room or a dining room of some kind, but when the author of the source I was using visited the place, he said it was just where John stored a lot of his hoarded things. Apparently, though, there has been many violent supernatural encounters in this room. While filming an episode of the UK paranormal show Most Haunted, a medium named Derek was possessed by an entity. Not only that, while they were filming, one of the presenters of the show was apparently pushed to the floor and violently beaten and kicked by some kind of entity no one could see.
Oh my God, that's horrifying.
But this was nothing new, as apparently a young independent ghost hunter at the age of 18 had even been thrown to the ground. In fact, John himself claimed to have experiences in there, but not ones as violent as those folks. He said it wasn't uncommon to see strange lights coming from the barn, and that once he was pressed up against the wall and held there by something invisible. And while pinned against the wall, he watched as something violently tore apart some curtains that were hanging in there. On top of that, John claimed that visitors could often see a tall shadow person enter and exit that building. Some say this shadow person was upwards of 7 feet tall.
Oh my God.
But that wasn't even the worst of it. Apparently, the inn was visited once by a father and son duo who were ghost hunters. And in the middle of the night, the father and son fled from the inn in terror. Apparently, while in the Mayflower Barn, they watched in horror as a ghost seemed to rise right out of the floor. At one side of the room in the Mayflower Barn, you'll see a staircase that leads up to the next floor. Visitors have often reported being pushed or thrown down these stairs.
Oh no.
And at the top of those stairs is another room filled with random collections of John's things, but one in particular is an old, large grandfather clock that John claimed was cursed. Often guests would report seeing a horrible face reflected in the glass on the clock's face. I guess many of the objects that John had acquired over the years were also said to be cursed. So on top of the land and the building being haunted, he's bringing in all these cursed fucking items as well. Come on, John.
Come on. You gotta be better than that.
Next, we come to what is known as the witch's room.
Yikes, I wonder if this one's gonna be spooky.
Oh, yeah. This one plays right into what I mentioned earlier, a story involving a supposed witch. It's a very fascinating story. So from what I understand, this woman had been summoned by a family who had a child, I think a son, who was gravely ill. Now, folks had always suspected her of being a witch, but she had never been outright accused. In some sources, it says that she even had a black cat as a familiar that followed her everywhere. But that could just be something added on for effect, who knows? This was back in the 1500s. So.
I mean, maybe she also just had a cat.
She also might have just had a cat, so.
So there you go. I have a black dog that follows me around everywhere.
That is very true. She had a reputation of being able to heal, and the family was desperate, and they asked that she care for their child. Well, the child's health did not improve, and the child eventually died, and the woman knew she would be accused of witchcraft and murder.
Oh no.
So before the family had a chance to realize what had happened to their son, the woman took off on the run. But she didn't even have time to get out of town before an angry mob, armed with torches and farm tools, came hunting for her. So she ran to the Ancient Ram Inn, and she asked the clerk there to hide, and apparently he let her do that. So she went to one of the rooms with all of her things and her cat and hid under the bed. And I guess the mob came knocking, and the clerk, of course, said that no one had checked into the inn that night. Well, they weren't ready to believe him just yet. Some of the mob did a search of the place and even entered the very room she was hiding in, but didn't see her because she was hiding under the bed. So they left. But here's where it gets interesting. None of my sources are clear about what happened next exactly, but while the woman was hiding alone in that room, she saw something so terrifying that it caused her to scream out, "Help me, help me." She apparently ran out of the inn and into the streets screaming. Of course, the mob captured her, and she and her cat were burned at the stake.
Oh no.
So the question is this. This woman was facing certain death if she was caught. Yet whatever she saw was so frightening that it sent her running right into the hands of the folks who were trying to kill her.
Oh, I wonder what she saw.
And of course, the witch's spirit is said to haunt the place and is quite aggressive. It makes me think of Berkeley Square. Remember the stories of people throwing themselves to their death out the window because of something in one of the rooms?
It's something in there is just so horrifying, yeah.
Waverly, now people, that it seems like more of like a sadness thing, like a depression thing, but same thing. People driven that one room on the 5th floor, people driven to die to avoid whatever's in there.
Mm-hmm.
Now we come to what is probably the most feared of all the rooms at the Ancient Ram.
Oh.
It's in this room where the most severe activity seems to take place. It's called the Bishop's Room. Back when the room was a functioning inn, guests would apparently refuse to ever stay in this room. They would report waking up in terror to the sound of screaming, yet the room was completely empty, yet it sounded like someone in the room with them was screaming bloody murder.
What the fuck?
The screaming is said to have come from the ghost of a man who was murdered in that room when his face was forcefully shoved into the fireplace.
Oh.
Furniture would be thrown violently across the room, and some would even claim to see the ghost of a dead young woman hanging from the ceiling, which apparently in the inn's history way back there was a woman that hung herself in that room.
Oh, God.
Once a plumber was doing some work in that room, and he claimed to come face to face with the ghost of a Roman centurion on horseback. So think about it. Romans would have been back in the,
Yeah, I guess, yeah, that does make sense.
when Rome was when they were, battling it out with the Celts and stuff like that. I mean, that was a big, they were there. It would make sense that there would be a Roman centurion. I mean, it wouldn't be out of place. They would have been there.
Right.
Folks have claimed to wake up and find the bed they're in surrounded by hooded monks standing silently over them.
No, that's the one for whatever reason. The hooded monks just standing around you. That is
Not fun, friends.
That's too much for me.
That doesn't sound fun for me. Some have even reported seeing the ghosts of both a shepherd and his dog.
Oh.
And speaking of dogs, supposedly even the most well-behaved of dogs are said to suddenly violently attack their own owners when in that room.
Oh no.
But perhaps the most terrifying entity at the Ancient Ram is said to prefer this room. This entity is not a ghost, but rather, as John claimed, a demonic succubus. He claimed that he was sexually assaulted on a nightly basis by this entity for years.
Oh no.
And guests who have stayed in this room have also reported being sexually assaulted, or like it was intending to, and they got out.
Oh my God, that's so horrifying.
And according to John, several guests that have stayed in this room had required exorcisms after leaving. Remember that episode of Ghost Hunters? He said like 10 people needed exorcisms after staying in that room.
Damn.
Now, very quickly, I want to play for you an EVP that was captured in the bishop's room. Now, I found lots of different EVPs that were taken there, and some of them it was just hard to even hear. I didn't want to. This was one of the better ones I found. So real quickly, we're gonna play. At first, you're gonna hear people talking. You'll hear John Humphrey's voice. You'll hear the voice of some of the people there, and then you'll hear like it's the whisper that's the EVP, obviously. So let's have a listen at that real quick. I will play it a couple times for you. I'll play the EVP part over a couple times, and then we'll discuss.
I can tell them to fuck off. That's the only way to deal with them. Don't be trivial. Oh, please leave me alone and go away. If you command them to go, they will go. Whether me, because I'm the owner.
Yeah.
And they respect me as the saviour of this building.
Get out, all of you.
So you've probably noticed at first you hear the voice of John Humphreys telling he's telling the investigators, don't play coy, just tell him to leave you the fuck alone. Don't be like, please don't, just be like, tell him to fuck off. That's what he's saying. But could you tell that voice at the end what it was trying to say?
No, I mean, I could definitely hear something, but what was it saying?
Apparently it was trying to say, get out, all of you.
Ooh.
Get out, all of you.
Damn.
Okay.
Wants all of us to get out.
Now, finally, we come to the attic.
Oh, no.
Or what is known as the Weaver's Attic. There was a time when one of John's daughters and her partner stayed in that room, and they would constantly report hearing the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor in the night. And folks who were in the rooms below, especially in the bishop's room, would say they heard it as well. It's believed that the attic is haunted by the ghost of a woman who was the daughter of an innkeeper back in the 16th century who was apparently murdered there in that room. And while we don't know for sure, a lot of mediums conclude that that woman's name was Elizabeth. But, obviously the Ancient Ram Inn is not that big. So that's really all of the rooms there, but I wanted to finish with this quote. And this was by Darman Richter, the author of one of my sources, the gentleman who stayed there. This is what he said about his experience there.
I heard nothing. No dragging noises from above, no growling dogs. I saw no phantom cavalier. No shimmering centurion emerged from the walls of the bishop's room. I wasn't raped, nor beaten, nor thrown along a corridor. To the best of my knowledge, I was not possessed. Perhaps it would be a strange thing in light of all that to say that I was disappointed by the experience. But still, it would have been nice to see something. I closed my eyes and lay back against the pillow, under the watchful gaze of anonymous portrait figures, faded faces that lent an austere tone to the space, while I suspect having been picked completely at random from antique shops and yard sales. I lay there for some time, listening to the building creak and sigh. The Ancient Ram Inn is alive, in a sense. It is filled with life, with beetles, flies, and woodworm, but more than that, its own timbers form an ancient organism, one that is not static, but rather warps and twists, shrinks and expands, rots from the inside out with 1,000 years of slow death. That was enough for me. The stories, the history of the building made this place exceptional. It didn't need ghosts to sell it.
So, Sort of it ends it on an open note there for him.
It does.
Because
It
obviously
does.
this was just one man's experience. And also, he said when he was touring the place, there was like a group of like 10 people with him.
Oh, okay. So that kind of makes it a little bit of a different situation.
You're right. His experience is probably not. And also, you can't hear as close. Like if you're listening for things that are quiet, if you're in a room with 10 people, you're not going to get maybe that full-on experience.
But still, very interesting. It's cool to hear the different perspectives on the place, and it's definitely a very eerie, weird-looking place. If you look online or if you look at any of these ghost adventure shows or whatever, like it's definitely got a spooky aura to it.
Oh yeah. Now, probably a lot of folks, at least over here in this part of the world, I first heard of the Ancient Ram Inn via Ghost Adventures.
Oh yeah.
Season 2, episode 8 of Ghost Adventures it's one of their early episodes. It's one I can remember from like back in the day because it's such an iconic episode.
Yeah.
First of all, this is early Ghost Adventures, so they're at peak. Zach Bagans is peak Zach Bagans.
Yeah, I mean, just like a lot of hair gel.
A lot of gel, a lot of, tight-fitting black t-shirts. They go to Ancient Ram Inn. They meet John. John's obviously a very eccentric dude. But here's the thing. They don't just go and bring their cameras and bring their EVP recorders and whatnot. I mean, they do all of that too, but they go to the room where they apparently found that grave that's by the fireplace.
Right.
They invite a witch to come.
A witch wearing this like satin red cape.
Yeah, and they want her to perform the ceremony, which she refuses to even do. She makes them perform. She tells them how to perform it.
Right.
Like, it requires like a dagger. There's like this altar. It's just like, whether you believe in it or not, I wouldn't fuck with that.
I
shit.
wouldn't fuck with that. Even though, you know what I mean? It's like one of those things where you really got to be certain that you really don't think there's any chance of anything happening.
Right. It's just so fun, like, just how fucking hard they went.
Oh my God, hard in the paint.
Inviting this, whatever these spirits are, to essentially possess Zach. He like lays down on the ground.
Yeah.
It's just so ridiculous. It's why it's like so hard in the paint. Whether you believe it or not, like why the hell? I mean, good ratings, I guess.
Yeah, I guess we're talking about it.
Because it's certainly like creepy as fuck. Like it's cheesy to watch via camera, like with, when you're watching it as a show, but like to be standing there, I'm sure it's like, fuck that.
Oh, absolutely.
No fucking way.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely bizarre, but an iconic episode, season 2, episode 8. Go find it if you can. It's an incredible episode of Ghost
You gotta
Adventures.
check it out.
Oh, and folks, I believe that is going to wrap us up for the haunting of the Ancient Ram Inn.
Damn. What a wild, scary, crazy episode, Dylan. Thank you so much for doing all of that research. We so appreciate all the hard work you put into this episode.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I love doing a good old-fashioned bump in the night haunted house.
Me too. It's really just the best, in my opinion. But what is the best of the best?
The best of the best? Let me list you some names that go bump in the night every night.
Ooh!
The names of our top-tier Patreon subscribers. Of course, the Dream, James Watkins, the Finnish Face Via Lundqvist, the Madman Marcus Hall, the Vivacious Vicky McHugh, the Tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the Heartbreak Kid Chris Hackworth, the Oh-So-Suave Sean Richardson, the British Bone Breaker Bex Martin, the notorious Nicholas Barker, the terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude Adam Archer, the sinister Sam Kiker, the Nightmare of New Zealand Noeline Vivilli, the loathsome Johnny Love, the carnivorous Kevin Bogey, the killer stud Carl Staub, the fire starter Heather Carter, the conqueror Christopher Damian Damaris, the awfully awesome Annie, the murderous Maggie Leach, the Sir of Sexy Sam Hackworth, and the evil Elizabeth Riley.
Wow, thank you so much to all of our Patreon subscribers. You mean the world to us, and we are so happy to have you on board. To join them, check out patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast.
Of course, please like, rate, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family, evangelize the good name of Creep Street.
That's right. Please go ahead and give us that 5-star review on Spotify.
Please do. Go forth and multiply. All right, citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
Good night and goodbye.
Goodbye.